Wake that ass up.
Early in the morning.
The Breakfast Club.
Morning, everybody. It's DJ Envy, Angela Yee, Charlamagne the Guy. We are the Breakfast Club. We got a special guest in the building, Brandon Victor Dixon.
What up,
sir?
B?
What's going on, y'all?
What's happening?
Chilling.
Now, you got a film you're doing.
Yeah. Well, in development.
Okay.
Yeah.
Called 88.
Yeah, it's called 88. I've been doing a lot of work in the social political sphere.
Well, explain to people who he is. Explain to yourself if people
Thank
who
you.
don't know.
Yeah,
'Cause
Thank
let's
you,
get into
sir.
that first.
Sorry,
I got
I'm
proper
just-
introduction.
really
My
eager,
bad.
Charlamagne.
I'm just assuming.
I mean, the people know,
Yeah.
but you can give them details.
people who don't
we
know.
can give them
Yeah.
details.
Please tell
though,
them,
you know.
The last
who you
time you
are,
saw
what
him, he
you've
played
done.
Collins in Rent.
Yeah. Fox.
He was Judas in Jesus Christ Superstar.
Yes.
And he plays Silver on Power.
Deleterious Silver.
I'm still trying to decide how I feel about you on Power.
What are you trying to think? What's on your mind? I can help you out right now.
You know, as Tasha's man,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I feel like you were, I guess, loyal enough to her and how you really
You
feel
ain't
about
loyal,
her.
bro.
Wow. See, no, I see Terry Silver as a liberator on the show, right?
Mm-hmm.
He came in, he set Ghost free, got Ghost out of jail.
Okay.
And then he was able to kind of liberate Tasha from the emotional prison that she was in with Ghost. But once he began to realize that she was the real gangster there, she was the real issue, that, then he knew he had to make a change.
Well, was that ethical as an attorney?
To be fucking your client.
Now it was after the case. He was no longer my client. He was no longer my client when I started dealing with Tasha. So and see, these technical elements are things we need to continue to consider even in our real life as we debate the issues amongst us in society.
Yes. It showed a lot of integrity, the fact that he pulled away from Tasha. Once he realized, oh no, hell, she really out here doing dirt.
And he let himself get dragged multiple times by her before he was finally like, okay, all right,
He had to die for it, but
he had to die for it.
is he really dead? Is it over?
Yeah, it's a wrap.
Okay.
It's a wrap.
That's why you
They
should have
gonna
been a
find the
little more
body?
gangster too, you know?
I don't think they are going to find the body.
Ain't gonna find-
I think they're going to move on swiftly. Which is
what?
Which is why I'm out here in these streets working on new projects.
But you
Well, I
always
got
worked-
time.
You was in Hamilton too, if I'm not.
Yeah, I was in Hamilton. I went from Hamilton to Power.
Oh, okay.
That's when I met Courtney Kemp, who created this show.
Amazing story.
Yeah, and so so that's why I've been out here, and next week I'm gonna be on Samantha Bee's not the White House Correspondents' Dinner again, just trying to continue to deal in the social political sphere, and that's what 88's about. It's a political thriller about a Nigerian American financial analyst who works for a Democratic super PAC, Political Action Committee, right? And while working for this group, he inadvertently discovers a conspiracy linking the organization he works for with a covert terrorist organization that's seeking to influence the Democratic nominee.
Uh-oh.
Oh,
And so,
Sounds like collusion.
right? Well, not collusion. it's deeper than that.
that's actually happening for real, by the way.
Well, I mean, it absolutely
Especially
is.
on social media.
It absolutely is,
Yeah.
And so, but we use that framework to explore dark money, but also the unseen influences on our politics and then on our social ideologies, right? We exist in this society and we have all these conflicts that we think are self-made, but a lot of times there are larger influences that seek to create divisions amongst us. And so our film is kind of built to expose a lot of those things,
And that's like COINTELPRO in a lot of ways too, though, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. When we talk about the moral issues that we have, right? We very often forget about the geopolitical and governmental influences on these things. So you talk about COINTELPRO and you talk about all our government programs like the CIA and the FBI and how they'll run these covert programs in different countries and even in our own country because for the greater good, right? But a lot of times we have to really investigate what are our own systems doing to us. You talk about COINTELPRO. You ever heard of Finders Keepers?
No.
That's another
Break it
program.
down.
That's a CIA program that Ted Gunderson, the former head of the FBI, discovered in 1987, which was a CIA program where they were child sex trafficking. They were literally going into other countries, country war zones, and then they would take children from adoption agencies, and then they would blackmail high-ranking political or government or financial officials around the world with young children, young boys, young girls, and so it's a program that they discovered in the 80s that then got swiftly shut down and nobody's really talked about, but it's something that they discovered, and it sounds wild to you, right?
So hold on, let me be clear. They would go and bring these kids from foreign countries. And then connect them to politicians and say, hey, they were having sexual relations.
It wasn't just foreign countries. It's wherever you could find disenfranchised children.
Gotcha.
So orphanages.
So even here?
in different areas where, as a government official or as a private military contractors, you can go in and you can have purview. We're going to adopt these children. We're going to provide them with X, Y, and Z. And the types of regulations that are going on in these places and the amount of kids that they have, they're very loosely regulated. It's the same kind of thing they talk about with the separations at the border, right? And then they found out that thousands of children have been given away to child sex trafficking organizations that have not been properly vetted or then they find are connected to child sex trafficking or groups, right?
Wow.
And so it's the kind of thing, if you look at like the wars in Afghanistan and in Iraq, and you look at, we run a lot of our wars in military theater with mercenary groups. We'll pay groups to serve proxy wars for us. Well, you're not just paying them with taxpayer dollars, right? You have to pay them in whatever commodity they can trade in that arena. So that's smuggling drugs in the bodies of soldiers. Yep. That's trafficking in whatever these people traffic in, so that you can make use of them for your means.
What made you dive so deep into this?
For me, this is just stuff that I begin to discover as you start reading things, and then it just leads to another thing. I like to read a lot, and I like to get into these things. But the more and more I discover about our politics, about our geopolitical structure, about our banking system, the more I think about the things that I've been told, the way I've been educated, and it forces me to expand my approach, how I think about things.
So what do you do differently? My son was playing video games with this kid. He's 18 years old. And his parents doesn't believe in government. And it made me think, the kid doesn't have any fingerprints, wasn't born in a hospital, was born in a house, doesn't have a driver's license, never been to school. So he's really undocumented.
He don't exist.
He doesn't exist. He can't take a flight. And the only reason that they had that conversation, he was driving his mom's car. They pulled him over, and they didn't know who he was. They was like, we don't know who
he's
you
not
are.
on the grid.
So that made me think about that. So do you move differently when you start thinking about the government, knowing all the stuff that you know now?
At this point, I can't move differently.
Right.
They know where I'm at.
We all in.
Yeah.
We got facial recognition.
I got global
fingerprints,
entry,
everything.
TSA pre-check.
But what that does mean is that while I am here, while I'm plugged in, I have to make use of every resource I have, every connection I have, to make sure that I'm working to further expand my consciousness and the consciousness of my brothers and sisters around me. Everybody around me, but particularly, the melanin endowed individuals of African and indigenous descent. That's really what I think.
That Finders Keepers just confirmed for me that Michael Jackson is definitely got blackmailed.
Yeah, I mean, well, look, I'm not going to get out here and tell you what did or did not happen, but I'll tell you that whole issue felt like propaganda to me.
Yeah.
How do you know what's real and what's not then? Because we can do our own research, but then how do we even know the research that we do? How do you determine
it's a challenge
what's factual and what's not? Because you hear so
challenge.
many different things.
But I think it begins just from within your own brain of being willing to ask questions, being willing to ask hard questions and have hard conversations, right? And I think that's where it starts. And it also, you have to start to read.
Yes.
And not just read the things that are readily available to you. You have to seek out information. And there are resources. And if you find the right books, then the bibliographies of those books will connect you to more books. And that's where I've tried to think about. Particularly as I think about my life and my upbringing or my religious upbringing, and then I've tried to delve more deeply into actually how those things fit into the historical and anthropological context of our world, really, right? Because they're the things we're told through our religious mythology, and then you have to contextualize them in history and be like, okay, well, what's really true, what's really possible, what's not, and then if this isn't literally possible, well, what is the narrative built to support, and what does that mean?
It's so easy to co-opt people's minds now, you know what I'm saying? Especially on social media, because you'll have these movements that'll start with hashtags that are actually positive, like Black Lives Matter or even ADOS, but then you start to see those hashtags being co-opted and people creating division and attacking certain people. And the next thing you know, you got just black people fighting online and you never really get anywhere. That all seems very systemically designed to me.
Well, I mean, I think some of it's systemically designed, some of it's a natural byproduct. I think of the systems in which we were brought into, right? Because that means that as you encounter a device that, like the internet, which allows us to communicate rapidly, which is great, we can share information, so we're aware of the things that happen. But because of how we are educated and developed, we don't take time. We're not thorough. We don't read full articles. We don't vet sources, and then we don't actually have comparative conversations. Because we're either talking to people who agree with us or not trying to offend certain people, right? And when you're engaged in conversations and you're working not to offend, or when you're in such a sensitive place that anything you say that's against my agenda is going to make me fight, then you're in like a win-lose situation. It means we can't explore the nuances of certain conversations. It may be. This is one of the things. One of the reasons that I value Kanye to many degrees, because his willingness to hurl himself into the shadows of corners of conversation, I think, is valuable for discourse. I wish that more people who are ambitious in that way would work harder for the details to contextualize a lot of the thoughts that we have. But you can't be afraid to explore the dialogue, and I wish we could return to a place where we could do that.
I want Kanye to start the conversation, not have it.
There you
You
go.
know what I'm saying?
with that. Yeah.
Start it and then let some other people who can speak on it have it.
Yeah, because I
But-
think the problem is that a lot of things that he expresses, he will admittedly say he doesn't know anything.
And that's the
But that's
problem.
fine, though.
Random thoughts
Right.
in his mind.
And that's why I say, he starts and I'm like, okay, I think I see where you try. And then I say, well, there's a piece of actual, historical information that would have helped you contextualize that to understand, I think, a little better, to get the point across that I think you're trying to make. But the discussion matters.
I think it's too much logic based in feelings and not facts.
There we go.
I think that's the problem.
There we go.
'Cause like you said, if he had historical context around anything that you're speaking about, like you'd be able to speak on things better than a lot of us do.
Yeah, absolutely.
What do you think about the Mueller report coming out?
I mean, we'll see. We'll let that play out. Again, a lot of the furor around the Mueller report and the history of the year and a half we spent on this thing feels like propaganda to me. Feels like political theater, and feels like not necessarily a great focus of our resources. It's very difficult to prove collusion. Collusion's a very vague thing, and our government officials who are campaigning for office are regularly interacting with foreign governments and foreign dignitaries and talking about things that inevitably are going to enhance their self-interest and the self-interest of the people around them.
Absolutely.
That's politics. So now, in the pursuit of looking for collusion, you could probably turn up a lot of obstruction of justice, people trying to prevent you from digging up things. But, for me, my focus isn't even on Donald Trump. He's a symbol, and that symbol has influence. But my focus is on all the people around him who have been complicit in what we see. And I don't want us to be so focused on Donald Trump that once he's gone, we simply encapsulate all the negative things that we've seen, all the information we've received about our culture, that we don't just pile that on him and then forget about the legions of people beneath and beside him in the Republican and Democratic Party that have kind of let our politics spin out in this way and not taking real hard lines on a lot of the issues that we're dealing with and are coming to the fore.
In the 88 film you were working on, you said the influence of finance has never been greater on the direction of the political machine. And explain that a little bit.
I mean, so we talk about money in politics a lot, right? And talk about campaign finance reform a lot. And you talk about that because now government is a business. And in order to stay in government, pretty much the second you're elected, right, you're spending 60, 70% of your time working to get reelected. You're raising money for yourself. You're required to raise money for the Democratic Party. So, and in fact, so last week I was in Washington with the Recording Academy with this program called Grammys on the Hill. And you lobby congressmen and women, about issues that have to deal with the professional recording artists. And, we split into groups of like 5. We each meet 4 senators. And you go to these meetings, and there are 2 groups inside the meeting, and then 1 group inside the conference room that the senator or congressperson is meeting with. They come out, they greet everybody, they say bye to this one, they bring you in for 15, 20 minutes. You spit what you can spit, then you go out, and you kind of do this throughout the day. And like the Recording Academy gets to do this once, maybe twice a year. But you go through a process like that, and they're going to take votes, so you're walking in the hallway telling them your issues, and suddenly you realize, okay, I see why companies and industries hire whole divisions to just be here in Washington and talk to these people on a day-to-day basis. Because unless they're going to see you, then it's just not enough energy in front of their face for them to really care about what's happening with you. And unless you're going to show up in my district when I get home, I don't know how much I'm really paying attention to you unless you're going to bother me later.
Yeah.
So it begins to reveal to you kind of why our political structure works the way it does. But, so that means these people have 20, 30% of their time to spend on real issues in real time.
Right.
And so what you can manage to get done, it's a difficult, man.
So how is this 88 film going to get black people more engaged in that process?
Well, I think for me, what 88 does is because what we deal with kind of some real history behind it, because 88 is an old Nazi code. It stands for H is the 8th letter of the alphabet. It stands for Heil Hitler. So one of the things we really tap into.
I'm stupid. I thought you were talking about that. That's one of the best years in hip hop.
Well, numerology has a lot of parallels and a lot of But really, what it begins to break down is how the issue of white supremacy really plays a significant issue on not just us here in America, but on a global scale. And we really talk about the ideology of white supremacy and how it limits us all. In the actual philosophical premise of the film, it was based on my partner, the writer-director. He wrote it after he saw the Tamir Rice shootings. Because he was like, we've been seeing all these shootings, and there's debate about whether the police are right or whether they understood what was going on. But he was like, he saw that video and he said, the thing that was clear here for me is, like I said, this is a child.
Right.
This is a child, so it's clear. And these police officers roll up and they shoot him down immediately. So now we're finally, like, people are going to be able to accept what I'm seeing. And he said he was watching online the commentary, and it was the same kind of stuff. Racist stuff and things like, well, this thug was this and this. And he's like, who are these people? So he started going online like, I need to figure out who these racist people are. And he was finding these Facebook pages of, middle class, suburban, East Coast, white men and women. And he was shocked because, they're very liberal people, multicultural groups. And he said, you know what? That means something is happening psychologically. He's like, this is a mental disease that is preventing these people from seeing a child in front of them. There is something that is happening that is deeper than that. And he said, so that's what made him begin to start to explore kind of how our ideologies affect us and make us interact, and how ideology moves beyond just the shade of your skin or where you're from. We live in America. America is a racially prejudiced society, a sexist society. And so that means all of us fall somewhere on the spectrum of being racist and prejudiced in some way, shape, or form. It's almost impossible to grow up in this country and not have a level of prejudice.
Absolutely.
It's almost impossible to grow up in this country and not be susceptible to patriarchy and sexist and be on somewhere in this spectrum. There's the hood-wearing KKK guy on the far right, and then there's the white guy married to a black woman and he loves his black children, but he crossed the street when he saw the guy in the hoodie on the other side, right? So these people aren't the same, but we're all somewhere on this spectrum because you're influenced by your environment.
Where's Laura Ingraham on that spectrum?
I'm looking for her. See some sheets blowing in the wind.
It's interesting. You said a lot of things, like even with the Facebook pages. How do we know that's real? Like, how do we know these people are even real people? You know what I mean?
And how do you know that all the articles saying that, Russians targeted and duped black people into getting Trump elected? How do you know that that's real, right? Because that sounds crazy.
Right.
Yeah.
Right? It's just we were the only people influenced enough by the internet to, But my whole point is that I think you have to continue to not deal in echo chambers, really vet sources, look for comparative information, and have conversations amongst ourselves, because it's not just about just the things we read, right? That's ingesting information so that we can have conversations amongst ourselves to establish where we are actually right now and where we need to move forward to.
What books would you recommend for some people who are like, okay, this is a lot for me to process. Where do I start?
I would start reading a book called The Browder Files by Anthony Browder, Dr. Anthony Browder. He talks a lot about the social political issues that have been existed in America. It's really from the 80s on. He used to write an op-ed, and he would talk about the kind of the African influence in the birth of America, and then how those the powers that kind of formed America have kind of split out from that point forward, and really just tries to tie real historical information to our mythology of how our country was built. I would start there. I would start with things like They Came Before Columbus by Dr. Ivan Van Sertima, Stolen Legacy by George James, which documents the foundations of Greek philosophy, and so books like that, which really just start to give you a historical context for a lot of the things that we're taught when we grow up.
You're raising money for 88 on your own. Is it because it's hard to get this kind of film made? Hollywood's like, nope, it's too much.
I know. I mean, it's because you want to have control over the things that you make.
Got you.
That's all it is. And I want to make sure that I fulfill the filmmaker's vision, and then I tell a story that deals with the real social politics, the real issues that we're talking. I don't want to talk around things. I want to name them. And then and even if I were creating something more superficial, I've done pieces about James Brown, Berry Gordy, Sam Cooke, Ray Charles. And one of the main tenets about all of these individuals is about ownership and controlling your work.
Yes.
Right.
That is empowerment. You have to control what you create, and you also have to control the distribution of what you create. And so that's really where our focus is.
You talked about earlier about it's hard out there finding a job as an actor. Is it getting better, or is it very difficult?
I mean, I was being facetious, but I think it's always a challenge. I mean, and I think and part of that challenge.
I'm starting to see more and more black films, more and more black TV shows.
You are seeing some, and with greater platforms more platforms on television, we are starting to see a greater investment in work. But again, it's not just about representation for me. It's about ownership.
Word.
It's not just because I show Black Panther is an incredible film for representation, but we ran to the movie theater. We bought tickets early to make billions of dollars for somebody else.
For some white people.
For somebody else. And we've celebrated it like it was,
like Wakanda was a real place.
Yeah, it's like all
power.
you're really excited about now is going to these same people with a barrel full of money and saying, look what I did for you last time. Can you please let me do another one?
Yeah.
And that's the kind of thing we have to get away from, right?
You think it's easier now, though, for ownership as far as being able to raise funds and even having platforms for people to be able to see your product?
It is. It is because there are more opportunities. There's more money around, but the level of consciousness is still stunted. And that is what really allows these things to happen. Not just the existence of the resources, but the willingness to understand that you have to make use of the resources. You have to apply them, and that you have to unite with your friends around you to aggregate them so that they can have a greater impact on a larger level and not be afraid of losing what you have because you're working to share it with others, or you're working to apply it to a cause that is maybe a threat to the greater systems in which you exist.
That's a fact, because if we're being honest, there is a lot more black representation on TV, but it's not a lot of things of substance.
And also, I think when you look at what the representations are, that also matters as well. It all matters.
What do you like more, TV or Broadway?
It's live performance, right? So there's nothing that can change that live exchange. There's nothing that replaces that. So I always keep doing that. But for me, it's really about what's the narrative and what's the best place. Where can I have the greatest impact? And sometimes that's on stage. Sometimes that's a podcast or a radio show. Sometimes that's a TV or film. Right? It's about creating vehicles for the expansion of consciousness and figure out where's the best place to upload those things into the matrix. That's kind of how I think about it.
Have there been a lot of roles that you're like, I would never play that role, but that you've been offered?
I mean,
If you play Judas, you'll play anything.
That's not true. Judas is special. You know, Judas.
You can't have Jesus without Judas.
Well, I said, okay, well, we gonna on April Fool's Day, you gonna let me talk about Jesus as Judas? Bring it. Let's go. That's an affirmation of my life path.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is. Come on, universe.
Is it hard to get those I guess I don't want to say negative spirits, but those type of characters out of you when you play the Judases or the Silvers?
No, and I don't think of them as negative characters at all. You know, and one of the reasons I think I connect to them and I'm able to play them well is because I see parts of myself in them. You know, Judas is a revealer. Judas brought truth. You know, and in Jesus Christ Superstar, we talk about the relationship of Judas and Jesus. You know, Judas loved Jesus the most. Loved his message the most.
His biggest hater. That's what they always say. Your biggest hater is your greatest admirer.
There you go.
Yeah.
But he was begging for Jesus to put a stop to what was getting out of hand. You know, he was begging him, and they both were.
What was getting out of hand exactly?
The message.
Okay.
The message was becoming no longer about the message and the people. It was becoming about Jesus himself. You know, it's how a message can then become about idolatry, right?
Yes.
You know, a message can get out of hand, and then a people can lose their way.
Yeah.
It becomes about doctrine and dogma, as opposed to an evolving system and philosophy of living, which is what our spiritual systems are supposed to be until they get co-opted into religious systems of oppression.
Yes.
Do you consider yourself a religious person?
No, not at all. I consider myself to be a spiritual person. You know, I was raised Episcopalian, I was raised Christian, but over the course of time, the contradictions of what I was being taught, I couldn't reconcile those things just with faith or with blind faith. And when you tell me that what you're teaching me has dominion over all things and it has for all time, and then I discovered that a couple of people made it up yesterday, based off of something that a couple other people made up the day before yesterday, then I'm questioning everything that you're telling, and I'm starting to pick it apart.
Black people, you talk about like the whole Jesus Judas thing. We love symbols.
Yeah.
So Jesus was a great symbol. What was Judas's exact symbol?
Was Jesus a great symbol? Is he a great symbol?
A great symbol of hope. You know, he's a
For
messenger
whom?
to me. I think the poor and disenfranchised to a certain extent.
You think the what? The what disenfranchised?
To the poor and disenfranchised. I think he was a symbol of greater hope.
I think there's the message, right? There's like the PR, the branding, and then there's what's actually being represented and what's actually happening.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is as black people, as you said, if an individual, if a group of people come and they target you on physical, emotional, and psychological levels, spiritual levels, they specifically target you on a spiritual level because that's the heart of your power.
Mm-hmm.
And then they give to you and they warp a religion to you and they make it represent your oppressor, and you continue for generations to give energy to that image. Because of the power of black people, we are able to energize anything, right? Even something that I think is false. But you can only get but so far, and at a certain point, you have to move beyond. You have to evolve. And I think of these religious systems as things that come about in their time. But our problem is when we allow them to become fixed dogma. We have to return to tradition. We have to. No, it's about, is this serving us right now? Is this causing love? Is it causing what it says it's supposed to do?
Mm-hmm.
And if it's not, then we have to evolve it.
Yeah, I see that.
Evolve it, right? What else? What else can I learn about in the context of this religious system and philosophy that will help me expand the needs that I have today with the communities that I'm dealing with today?
Yeah.
You know, that's how I try to think about it.
I mean, I'm the original, not even the concept of Jesus, but if you look at what Jesus stood for, just being, I guess, a truth teller, a messenger who was here to help the less fortunate. That's what I mean when I say he's a good symbol.
Yeah, but that,
the religious aspect of it, I'm like,
But I don't need Jesus to represent such basic elements, right?
Yeah.
And I think it does me a disservice to look outside of myself to find that, because that's giving both my power and my responsibility to an entity outside myself. So that means that when I find myself in places of conflict or I'm facing obstacles, I'm not seeking my own power. I'm not trying to empower myself.
Instead of what would Brandon do?
Jesus would get crucified. Jesus would die. You know, but I need to live, not just for myself, but for my people.
Word.
You know, so I think that those are important ideas to think about.
So Judas is a good guy to you?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Break that down a little more.
But I would say this: Judas is a guy.
Okay.
Because I don't see Jesus as a good guy. They're guys, and these are all allegorical figures. They're not real people. But I see them as symbols of people. And what I appreciated about Jesus Christ Superstar is that they were symbols of people, and we were exploring their struggles. You know, one of the most powerful character in Jesus Christ Superstar is God. But we never hear from this person. We never see this person. But we see the actions of people who believe that God is telling them the things that they have to do. And Jesus and Judas both believed fervently in what God, quote unquote, God was telling them to do. And it led them to destroy themselves and the person they loved most. And I don't know what that means.
Yeah. Who was right, who was wrong? You don't know.
And what did you think you were following? And should you have been following that?
Ooh.
Maybe not. I don't know.
Yeah.
But these are the questions that are worth asking.
I'm just going to pray right now.
Who are you going to pray to?
That's a good question.
I'll be sure. He light skinned. You know who his God is. When you're 40 and light skinned, your God is I'll be sure. You want to talk about the Young New Yorkers? What's that about?
So I work with a group called Young New Yorkers, and they create arts-based mentorship programs for 16 to 17-year-old first-time juvenile offenders. So on a very basic level, and they convince prosecutors and judges to sentence these children to arts and mentorship programs instead of sentencing them to jail. It's a small program in New York, but it is expanding. And, I got to know them and what they're working on, and I've just really been inspired, not only by the young people, but just by the very obvious benefits that keeping a young person out of a jail cell can provide.
What are some specific success stories with Young New Yorkers?
I mean, really with Young New Yorkers, I think the main success story with Young New Yorkers is that the program is expanding primarily because the young people who come into it stay with it or come back to it to be mentors for other young people. It changes their lives, and they see the value of just very key conversations and opportunities they had, so they make sure that they bring those to other young people around
And then
them.
people see the value in them as well.
Exactly. I'm also working with the Family Probation Office, and they have a program for young men called the SWAG program, right? And they found that the way they were traditionally running their program, they just weren't seeing any results. But when they kind of started to break down the barriers of how they would have their meetings, they started having actual conversations with these young people about the struggles that they're dealing with on a very practical level and giving them practical skills. Like we did necktying and bow tying the other day, for job interviews and things like that. But even the conversation about why it was necessary. It's like meeting young people on a practical level, giving them tools to face the things that they're dealing with. It seemed very basic for us because we've had enough experience to learn how to deal with these things. But if you're a young person and you don't have a stable environment, then you go into these traditional environments, and when you face obstacles, you're not sure how to deal with them emotionally. And that's it. So it's about kind of coming back down to a root level and figuring out how to have a conversation with these young person and so empower them.
I like that whole conversation about teaching the young men how to wear neckties and suits, because sometimes people think that looking presentable is respectability politics.
Yeah. Some people, but look, man, information is power, right? And experience is power. And the ability to adapt to different environments and understand why you're adapting to different environments matters. And I think just because you are dressing for a certain environment in order to create the greatest advantage for you, sometimes maybe that is respectability politics. But I think you need to operate with things on a very practical level. It's not just
in a lot of HBCUs they actually have etiquette class where they teach brothers and sisters how to do different things like tie a necktie, a bow tie, how to eat, what fork you use, what knife you use. So I think a lot of that is good, especially when you go to places, when you're having meetings and you're doing things outside of your normal, typical realm.
Yeah, you want to arm people with tools to operate in different environments.
Yeah, and you tap danced, right? You used to know how to tap dance.
I didn't know how to tap dance.
But we act like we don't do that
I know how
anyway.
to play golf. I know how to swim.
Right.
You're not going to talk in front of your grandma or your mama. Well, I would hope you wouldn't, the way you would talk in front of your boy.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying?
You change your language, you use less curse
And what
words,
does
you
tap
change your
dance have
syntax.
to do anything, motherfucker? Well, excuse me.
I just like the visual.
That was nice too. What is it? Back toe, front toe, whatever it was.
Shut up, Gregory Hines.
Heel toe, baby.
Oh, heel toe. See, he knows.
Step,
He's
shuffle, ball,
It's
chain.
Broadway.
Come on now.
heel toe. That's what it was.
Well, tell them how to donate to 88, man.
I mean, no, you really, it's a program in development, so it's not like we're out accepting donations. But I'm talking about people about the film right now, and as the film comes out, I just want people to be aware of it and be aware of the issues surrounding it. And also, I appreciate the opportunity talking about the film, because mostly it just connects to these broader social political issues that y'all bring to the fore on a regular basis, and I really appreciate y'all for that.
Well, how can we help get it made? What can we do?
Donate, nigga.
All right,
Okay. All right. Say no more.
there you go.
All right.
That's how you can help. I mean, in all honesty, if like-minded individuals like yourself. And other people, I've been connecting with other people in the entertainment sphere who are about building projects like this and building them amongst a group of individuals that understand the value of creative control. That's really helping me form more conversations with those of us in the business that think like that and want to seek opportunities for stories like this and opportunities for other creatives who don't have the level of access that I have or that you have, So, I mean, really, if you want to help, it will really be about ingesting the material of the film, continue to talk about the things you do here, and working with me to help build a consensus to make it.
Absolutely. I got one more question, because I just want to know your answer on this. What do you think the symbol of Nipsey Hussle will represent in the future?
It looks like the symbol of Nipsey Hussle is going to be an incredibly powerful one, just about unity and empowerment and about recognition of self. And seeing the resonance of yourself and the people around you. One of the interviews I saw being replayed about Nipsey the other day is where he was talking about the change in his psychology, in returning to home, to Africa, and coming back and beginning to recognize, how you operate when you are under assault and you're simply looking to survive, and then how you look at yourself and you look at the people around you, and then how you begin to target the people who look like you. You're targeting the things that are inside of yourself. And how his trips and his learning were breaking him out of that cycle, and finding periods of peace or helping him to start to process things outside of an emergency mindset. And so when I'm looking at what's happening now, like the marches that my son is organizing and things that Tamika's doing, and
what up, Tamika?
When I look at that, it looks like the power, that the energy of this individual posthumously is going to be an extraordinary one about empowerment and about about remembering who you are and what you are capable of within yourself and within each other. You know, for me, that's where God is. I find God in the expansion of my consciousness and the expansion of the consciousness of the people around me. You know, our unity together, that's how you create God energy. That's how you tap into the God force. You know?
Brandon Dixon, y'all.
Well, thank you for joining us, sir.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate y'all.
Yes, sir.
All right, it's Brandon Victor Dixon. It's the Breakfast Club. Good morning.